Hey, folks, and welcome back to Women of Water Get Real. Understanding where women are leaking from the water career pipeline and how we can stop those leaks and how we can get women back and really ensure that every woman that steps forward to be part of this incredible industry, this incredible water sector, has a full and contributing career. And we are so honored today to welcome to the summit Marcia St. Martin, who is really a hero of mine. Has was head of New Orleans Water and Sewer Board during Katrina, and many other things. But that was, I think, one of the things that really stood out to me was the stories that she has shared about what that experience is like, and she's going to walk us through her life journey of what it is to be a water leader, what it took for her to get there, and how she's continuing to contribute in many ways since her retirement from the water board. Marcia, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kat, for inviting me to be part of this wonderful summit. My career in water was very interesting. It was different from most people. I did not come from a science-based industry. And I think that's one of the things we have to look at. How do we recruit women into the water industry through a non-traditional method? Because in order to have a successful drinking water, wastewater, stormwater utility, it's a business. It's the business of delivering the most vital service to the community that any community can ever provide. You know, water touches every citizen every day. So the business model behind water is crucial. So we need people we need to recruit people to come to the industry who have not necessarily only science-based backgrounds, but financial backgrounds. The balance sheet's important. No single community can fund a major water infrastructure project without debt servicing. So you've got to understand the bond market. You have to understand Wall Street in order to provide that. You cannot provide water and drinking water services without the ability to pay the daily bills. So the cash register, the water meter is your cash register. So understanding the importance of having an effective meter reading program, because that's your cash register. You've got to market with your product. So, the industry needs people who have communications backgrounds. Water has such social impact. And some of the leaders that I got to meet very early in my career were sociologists, because just the social impact of water. In fact, one of the most dynamic women in the environmental sector space is Dr. Beverly Wright, who has a degree, undergraduate and graduate degrees in sociology. So every facet, every job you can think about, every career path that a person may want to take early in life could lead to a career in water. My journey began with the water industry in 1992, and I was retained and hired as the deputy director for the business sector of the utility. I did that work for about 10 years. When the director retired, I had the opportunity to replace him and became the first non-engineer to head the water utility, the first female and the first African-American. And it was a tremendous journey. And I think as a female, I was in the right place at the right time for Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina devastated the city of New Orleans, devastated the region. And while we traditionally think about recovery as far as the infrastructure is concerned, we need to recover the minds of our employees. So in my role as a woman, I understood the need to nurture, the need to make sure that in addition to providing the tools and equipment that the team needed to restore the facilities and the infrastructure, I needed to provide basic things like housing, clothing.
Yeah, I mean, this really a hard, not just for the city, but for the employees as well. And you raised some really good points already in terms of, as I've talked to some of the early pioneers, some of the earliest women to rise to leadership positions in water, people like Pat Mulroy in Las Vegas, people like Lisa Lisa Speranza in Boston, who now actually lives in New Orleans. They were coming from non-engineering sectors. They were coming from finance. They were coming from government relations, because, as you say, these are public agencies, right? And these are involved in so many other things: the business side, the policy side, the people side. I think a lot of the utilities have moved away from this idea that the head of the water utility is the city engineer, the head of the state water agency is the state engineer. That we are seeing more disciplines coming, men and women from different disciplines, now stepping into leadership, and also recognizing that important role of how you work with your employees, which is, I think, the workforce aspects, as our industry becomes more diverse, that has come into play a lot more, helping both women and men to have more time with family, or to deal with crisis and trauma and the impact of living through something like a hurricane. So take us back to what happened. Like, how did it all start for you all? You were going about doing your business and running the plants and everything, and maybe we'll get a hurricane, maybe not. How did that walk
living
us through it?
living in Southeast Louisiana, hurricanes is just something that happens. Hurricane season begins on June 1 of every year and goes through November 1st of every year. So every utility within the region, whether you're in South Florida, you're in Texas, you're in Alabama, you're in Mississippi, you begin to prepare for your hurricane season, even up the west, even up the East Coast. So you prepare the hard infrastructure. You prepare your supply chain. You ensure that you've hardened the utility. You make sure your communications, as far as hardwiring is concerned, is available. But what we found in New Orleans, what we had not prepared for, was the impact, the human impact on the team, and the human impact on the community. 80% of the city of New Orleans infrastructure was lost. Every one of our sewer, drainage, and pump stations, because we operate a water utility, stormwater utility, a very small power plant, as well as a wastewater utility. Every facility within the East Bank of Orleans Parish was severely damaged. On the West Bank, we had power challenges. So we need to figure out, how do we strap on our boots when our family members had evacuated to other cities? How do you retain people when there's water rising, to care for the survivalship of your team, to make sure that I could effectively evacuate everybody from flooded facilities? So it was a need.
Team itself, you and your home, your team's homes. It wasn't just that their families were gone, their homes were gone, that you were in trailer parks, right?
Well, my home was under 8 feet of water. So by the time I was able to get to my home, Mo had literally taken over. So my husband and I decided, it's time to tear it down. We had been in the house for close to 30 years. Kids were grown. So we built something in a different part of town that met our senior needs. But suddenly there was, 8 feet of water in the home. And I had the opportunity, by working with the Corps of Engineers, to actually see my home underwater from air, along with several of my other team members. And that impact was dramatic.
Yeah.
It was a dramatic impact. And I think it focused on the fact that this is not an impossible task to do. It's going to be a challenging task, but we're up to it. And, I had over 300 team members working in every facet of the organization on August 29, 2005. So it was important to ensure that every person was able to be safely evacuated from the facilities that they were assigned to. And most importantly, public utilities and public agencies have all kinds of rules about, using long distance services and not doing this and not doing that. We have more negative rules than we have positive rules in the public sector. So it was important to post a telephone number access that every employee, no matter what time of day or night or day of the week, felt as though they needed to call home with a few working water lines, few working communication lines that we had left in the city, and to be able to find their families wherever they had evacuated throughout the United States and, get to touch people. It was important to provide not just communications for family members, but also to be able to provide basic things like food and clothing. We talked about Elisa Speranza from CH2M Hill, who came from a non-scientific background. And, CH2M Hill was a major contractor for the agency at that time. And Elisa's request was not the typical engineering request. She said, "What do you need?" And I said, I've ordered all these T-shirts, but I've got to find a way to wash it. So she arranged for washers and dryers to be shipped into one of the plants that was, and that's the role, I think, of empathy that women can bring to this industry.
I remember. Right. Yeah. So I remember when right after Harvey, I was privileged to be in a briefing that was organized with all the water innovation clusters. That a lot of the clusters were, that had created little startup companies that were designing things specifically for disasters, were told by the Houston cluster, if you can get it, and run it on a generator and get it to Houston, get it down here, right? And one of the speakers at that session was Yvonne Forrest, who had just become the head of the utility at the time Harvey hit, and saying, as you said, with your, flying over your home, that she saw on the news her plants going underwater. And at that moment saying, I never felt so alone. But then having this outpouring of support that, for those of you who are thinking about the water industry, it is a community. It really is. That she started getting calls from people at utilities all over the place, and other professionals like Elisa Speranza that, that you step in and say, what do you need? We're there for you. Right?
And it's in a time of a disaster like Katrina or Harvey or Ida or Rita, you can just throughout the United States, throughout the world. It's really important to think about, we always think about water as our friend. We hold water as a valuable product in our hands. We want to ensure that every customer every day has a wonderful drinking quality of water, and that we effectively take away the waste, we treat it and we return it back to nature, and we effectively collect the stormwater. But in a time of a natural disaster, it's so easy to think about water as your enemy. So how do you balance water as the enemy? Because now it has destroyed the assets, destroyed the lives of people, yet it's the tool that you've got to make sure is available for every citizen when they decide to come home and clean their structures. You've got to have potable water and sanitation, so as people re-enter the community, they can safely do it and effectively clean their homes. So the utility's got to be on the forefront. The utility has to be able to restore facilities before the citizens can return. So Katrina was a humbling experience. And I'm going to share with you another humbling experience for Katrina. I served for a good many years on the Water for People board. And very comfortably made donations for hand washing stations and never equated it to reality. Following Katrina, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA brought in resources. One of the resources that FEMA brought into my utility was a food sanitation system, a food service, and hand washing stations. So as I stood in front of a hand washing station, as a senior official in a water utility, it was a humbling experience before I would enter the food tent. So as a utility leader, you've got to consider every component of providing for your team, but also providing for people who are not as fortunate as you are. In major U.S. cities, we think of water as something that we just take for granted. We turn on the pipe and it's there. But in developing countries, that's not the option. So as water utility leaders, we have to look beyond what's in front of us. And utility, Katrina helped me to understand more effectively the value of water and the value of sanitation for everybody in the world.
I'm sure you're familiar with this report produced by the water utility industry, U.S. Water Alliance. It's Closing the Water Access Gap. Came out literally days before, just a short time before COVID started. And in fact, this was the last event that we covered on Capitol Hill when they were presenting this report and talking about everything from the Navajo Nation to Appalachia to communities around the country where there are people here that don't have water and sanitation in their home, and what are some of the challenges around that, and in the Black Belt of Alabama, and in various regions, and when we keep, like, we're doing this summit during the week of United Nations water, the very first time since 1977. It's been a long time since the last UN water conference, a dedicated water conference by the United Nations just focused on water. And we had a presentation by Marcia Brewster, who did a lot of work with the UN, including work on gender and water, and sort of how it's gone back and forth between focusing on, we need to think about women and water in terms of women in those poor countries elsewhere who are being impacted by water. But, when we have issues in this country, and so often when issues come up around water, it's women who are dealing with it most directly. And if there's impacts on kids, if there's lead, if there's, what have you, that often, if we're working with community leaders, we're often working with women, right?
No matter where a woman is in her career, if she's a mom and a wife, that responsibility lies with that female in that household, to ensure that even in a developing nation, that's why I think women have been so effective in developing nations, to ensure that water and sanitation is available for the lives of their children. Mm-hmm. And they've taken the lead through the work I was able to do with the Water for People. Women have taken the lead in ensuring that there's potable water in their communities and adequate sanitation in their communities. But as water utility executives, we always have to ensure that water is affordable. And we have to understand that rate raising is a matter of life. It's a matter of necessity, but also affordability in how you manage that utility to ensure that your product is affordable, because people cannot live without water. They cannot live without sanitation. So how do we close that gap to ensure that we maintain regulatory compliance, we maintain a viable system that's up to date with the best and the latest infrastructure compliance and equipment, but still managing affordability for every member in your jurisdiction? It's a challenge. I wish I knew the answers to that. And maybe you could have a summit of how to talk about affordability, how women can help with affordability in the future. But it's a major issue.
Yeah, and getting the word out, because many more utilities now have adopted water affordability programs for the lowest income members of their community. And if someone's on food stamps, if someone's on Medicaid, they're probably also not in a good position to pay for a water. And But then it's a matter of thinking, where are you going to find people who are in need of these programs? So you had the LIHEAP program on the heating side, and then you've got equivalent programs on the water side, and they're programs that, opportunities. People are sitting and waiting for their food stamp, in the social services offices of their city for hours and hours and hours. It's like, maybe that's a place to get the word out and reach the people who need it.
Maybe the solution is not, and maybe this is very personal. Maybe the solution is not how to ensure that there are federal, city, state resources, but people can't afford it. But how can a water utility, as a provider, ensure that the product is always affordable, irrespective of income level? Because if you look at the social impact, people should not have to beg for water services in a community. Should not have to say, I can't afford it, therefore I need you to give me something. You've got to respect human dignity. And you respect human dignity by ensuring that your product is not only safe, but also your product is affordable. And I don't know how to bridge that gap. It's very easy to say, let's have a social service program to help with affordability. But I think it's more important, a more difficult challenge is how do you ensure affordability without having to have a social service program that stigmatizes people and also make other people unwilling to participate. I think we always have certain members of, no matter what community, I don't want to help somebody. So we've got to make sure that we find that balance, that tap water is available for everybody in the community and affordable with everybody in the community. And I wish I had an answer of how to do that, but I don't.
Yeah. Well, I certainly having more amazing women like yourself at the table helps to make sure that the right questions are asked and that different solutions are being considered. And as we were getting ready for this conversation, we were talking also about, we're talking about this career pipeline. We talk about that women's career paths do not always look like men's. It's not always going to be the same, go to engineering school, do your internship, go straight into a job, do kind of low level stuff, start moving up, doing the journeyman stuff. It's kind of like apprentice, journeyman, master, right? And then it's just totally focused on work. And yet with women, we are sometimes in a situation where, when the kids are young, we might take a step back. We might not advance as fast, but then be able to step in. Or if we have aging parents or personal health challenges, we step back and step in. And when you had this opportunity to rise to leadership, it was later in the lives of your kids, right?
It was. I completed undergraduate work when I was only 21 years old, and was married at 23 and children by 25, and decided to enter the work world right out of college, prior to marriage and prior to the children. And I worked in municipal government as an accountant, worked in municipal government as managing an automotive fleet for the city of New Orleans, which forced me back to a trade school to understand automotive technology, because I suddenly find myself managing a fleet. But as opportunities progress, I always accepted only opportunities that required me to work Monday through Friday, basically 8 to 10 hours a day, and not required me to do nighttime activities or weektime activities, because my boys were the most important thing to me. My husband had a very aggressive career, and it required lots of time beyond the normal traditional day. So I made that personal decision, not to accept certain types of management jobs until my boys were older. I think I shared with you, I accepted the position with the water utility when the oldest was his last year in college, and the youngest had entered high school. Saying that, though, I progressively increased responsibilities in the type of jobs. from an accountant to managing city fleet to designing and implementing the parking program for the city of New Orleans, which is an interesting challenge. And then became the director of a regulatory agency, which is zoning, licensing, permitting, building inspections, building codes. So I had great mentors that allowed me to learn, develop, and then I was finally ready to accept the job. It had been offered for several years before I made the decision to say yes in the water utility. But that's why it's important that we look at leadership in water utility through non-traditional paths. That's not necessarily the graduate engineer, the graduate chemist, the graduate environmental scientist, but the graduate accountant, the graduate economist, the graduate communications director, the graduate sociologist, because all of those factors and functions are viable to the effective business of water, because water is a multi-billion-dollar industry in this nation.
Absolutely. I did running your house and managing the kids and, all of that. How did that help you being a mother? Did that prepare you for stepping into this role of being the mother of all of the staff in your utility? I mean, you have that role of, as part of leadership of not just running the plant, but actually understanding the people. Was it helpful that you had the experience that you had with your kids?
Definitely. It, the role of motherhood, the role of learning how to, with kids with Saturday activities, with scouting or ball games or whatever, all helped me to learn how to juggle and balance lots of different and competing, interests. But that nurturing role that I learned to develop as a mother helped me understand that I needed to nurture my team at the time of crises. Which was a role I had never thought of. I always assumed my role was to ensure that there was an adequate, computer power, that the chemicals were there, that the train arrived, because we operated a small railroad. The engine arrived with the chemicals on the right time and date. There was power. We had financial capabilities available, but to understand and accept a role that you've got to nurture people at the same time and ensure that you allow them to heal in their own way and help them by providing the resources. I worked with in our communications department and educational department. We had just a dynamic woman who ran that agency, that section of the agency. And following Katrina, we developed several trailer sites for employees to live. And so we had 3 trailer sites at different plants and different facilities. And there's one particular woman who was in charge of our community education program said, Marcia, we've got families back in these trailers and kids are going to school. We've got to find a way in which they can effectively work with FEMA. They can effectively do homework. They can't do it in these small trailers. So we went out and purchased these huge trailers in which this particular team member set up communications equipment with computers so kids could go in and do their homework in the evening. The spouse could go in and, there's a computer access, even 17 years ago, you couldn't communicate with FEMA unless you were doing it through a laptop. They'd have homes to go to, and they'd have the power within a trailer for that kind of communications equipment. So this team member had the foresight to say, we need to provide those facilities. And those are the kinds of things that I think women in water can bring to the agency, in addition to being an effective leader of the agency, but can bring those human aspects to the agency.
And that really has a lot of echoes with what I just heard from Jackie Jarrell at Water Environment Federation in terms of COVID, that we had to think about things like, we had some people who were at home able to work, work from home, but then you had those who needed to go offsite and actually go work on the lines, and usually, sitting together in a truck, especially early in COVID, when there was a lot of, it was safety. It was not knowing how safe it was to go out and then coming home to their families. It was, we hear a lot of stories of kids were trying to do their remote schooling from home. When you have a lot of people in a small unit, so you have, there was people were building community centers for kids to be able to do their work from home compute, their homework assignment, but in a larger space where they could actually get out of the house. When people were all trying to jockey for who is going to get the couch and who is going to get the kitchen countertop to do their work, when everybody was trying to work from home and all the kids were trying to go to school from home. It was, well, how do we actually make that work? How can we actually support people, especially in a time of crisis, right?
COVID, like Katrina, at least with COVID, people had an infrastructure in place, a home, that even though there was not adequate space to be able for, every child, every adult to have a place to work. Katrina, there was no home available. So then we were putting people in trailers.
Okay. Right.
Which was an entirely different challenge. And it was before everybody had a laptop or smartphone. Those things didn't exist in 2005.
Right.
But I think for today's utility executive with COVID has to understand, and I think we, as an industry, we learned that every employee does not have to be at a desk Monday to Friday, 7 to 7. You can execute and you can deliver in using a different method. I've just in reading trade journals and trade industry, I think more and more utilities are going to remote meter reading because of COVID, are going to decentralized data collection. And so I think the industry, and for the water industry to survive for the next 100 years, we need to constantly look at innovation and different ways of delivering services and different ways to maximize the intelligence of our team members. I had a mentor to tell me many, many years ago, when you're interviewing, you look for the best brain possible, but then you hire that brain and you stifle it with rules, regulations, and not letting people to excel. And I think, just talking to people with COVID, because people had to make decisions differently because the supervisor wasn't in the next cubicle. I think people had an opportunity to expand their brain capacity, and people had an opportunity to demonstrate what they could do working independently. So I think that's going to be the next thing we need to look at as an industry. How do we capitalize on what we've learned from COVID to have a better water utility for the next 100 years?
Absolutely. And you have been doing some really interesting things since you retired from the utility in 2014. Tell us a little about what was your next step. A lot of folks now, they finished their 30 years, they got their gold watches, but they're still vibrant, contributing people in society and have a lot more to give. What was your post-utility steps, and how are you continuing to contribute?
It's been an exciting journey, a really exciting journey. New Orleans and the Louisiana community, we live with water. We learned the phrase living with water before it was popular in today's vernacular. So I had the wonderful opportunity to serve on the board of directors of an organization which is called the Pontchartrain Conservancy, which is formerly the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation. So I served on that board of directors for 6 years, and rising to the position of vice chair of that agency. There's a dynamic group in what's considered the lower ninth ward of New Orleans, which prior to Katrina had the largest population of home ownership in the city, but was most devastated and had the least amount of federal resources, state and city resources to help with this rebuilding because it was primarily an African American community. I had an opportunity to serve as a volunteer with St. Kofa, which is a community development corporation. In fact, just yesterday, I had the wonderful opportunity, today's Sunday, you're right, yesterday, Saturday, to participate in a wetlands tour of a nature trail that this organization has built adjacent to the waste treatment plant in New Orleans. Nature trails, natural cypress trees. So I've had the opportunity to do that. But I'm also a product of Catholic education. So I spent from kindergarten to undergraduate school in Catholic schools. My elementary school and high school was staffed by a group of religious women, Sisters of the Holy Family. And so I do a significant amount of volunteer work with them. I headed the 175th anniversary celebration. I serve on their finance committee as well as their development committee. And I do a lot of work in promoting what's called in the Catholic community, the cause for canonization for the founders of the Sisters of the Holy Family, which is a woman who founded this organization in 1842 as a free woman of color when women were not accepted in the church, and African American women were not accepted in religious communities, founded a religious community that's been around now for 182 years, educating people throughout the United States, Central America, and Africa. So I do a tremendous amount of volunteer work with them. So my post-water utility has been rewarding, exciting, and ability, because of my experience in the water utility industry, have the resources, economic resources to be able to support those agencies.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, that is that's a tremendous story, and you are a tremendous resource. And and there's so much that women water professionals today can learn from you in terms of what it takes to have a career in this industry, what it is that we bring to this industry, and what it is to serve. We need to be able to step up and serve. We need to be there in times of crisis. It isn't just decent wages and good benefits. It's we are lifeblood of the community. When we step forward and say, yes, I want to be a water professional, I want to be an environmental professional, we have an opportunity to take on just some of the biggest challenges facing society and the planet, whether that's at an international scale or right in our own community. And it's really a wonderful opportunity to serve. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience?
I think as water utility professionals, we are servant leaders. And as women, we understand and know how to deliver servant leadership without being submissive, but being powerful, focused, in charge, and to demonstrate the power of being a servant leader, a woman who can make things happen every day, because every time that tap is turned, we have been successful. Thank you very much
for being here. And thank you, everyone who's watching us here. Please do type in the chat any questions, comments. Marcia will be available we'll be able to access that and see your comments and respond. And please do join us for all of the amazing guests that we've had throughout the week, and just discover the world of water from a woman's perspective.
Thank you very much for including Marcia Armand St. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.